Welcome back to the NWR Virtual Healthcare Conference. Next presentation's from one of the private companies on the schedule, which is ImmVirX, and we've got the Acting Chair and CEO, Dr. Malcolm McColl, presenting on behalf of the company. ImmVirX is seeking to advance a new generation of cancer treatments by developing a novel oncolytic immunotherapy that targets cancer indications with high unmet need. You might remember Malcolm and the team from ImmVirX, and the team joined and formed ImmVirX in late 2019. ImmVirX, as many will remember, was taken over by Merck in 2018 for $502 million in what was a really successful transaction for the local sector. ImmVirX has been in the clinic for almost a year now, which I'm sure Malcolm's going to elaborate on shortly. Once again, if any questions, please feel free to submit them via the function within Zoom, and we'll get to those at the end. But without any further ado, I'll hand it over to Malcolm.
Thanks, Matt, for the introduction, and congrats on the success of your conference. So without further ado, why don't we just sort of step to the next slide. And this is obviously just our disclaimer slide, so the full details are on our website for those that want to read the fine print. So really, we are a company that is developing oncolytic viruses to tackle some of the most globally important cancer types. We are using a bioselected RNA virus that targets receptors that are overexpressed on these cancer types. We think this is a really great approach. We have that validated with Viralytics and Cavitac, our previous company, as described by Matthew. And so we're really looking here at a little different to Viralytics. We're actually targeting the most important cancer types globally, those cancer types where there is actually a pretty poor response to immune checkpoint therapies. What we're aiming to do with this oncolytic virus is really inflame the cancer, draw in immune cells, and then tackle the cancer not just by the oncolytic virus, but also by the immune cells that are drawn into that tumour tissue. We think this is really a great way to enhance the activity of not just the immune checkpoint inhibitors, drugs like Merck's Keytruda, but also the CAR T therapies that don't work actually in solid cancer. We think it's a great way of driving those into cancer tissues. So a lot of opportunities for combination down the track. One of the really strong attributes, I guess, of oncolytic viruses, in particular, both the Viralytics virus and now ImmVirX, is that we have a very favourable safety profile. We've seen this to date in the ImmVirX studies, more on that a little bit later. Also a very low cost of goods, so the manufacturability is not going to be an issue for big pharma when we reach that stage. In terms of the progress of the company, we initiated operations in April 2020 after a seed round in early 2020, and really pleasing to report that it took us about 3 years, in fact, to get into the clinic, and that's a remarkably quick progress from this very experienced team. You'll hear a bit more about in a minute. So a cost-effective and very efficient progress there as we move into the clinic. We now have a second asset that's been bioselected to target lung cancer, so building up a little bit of a portfolio here, which is wonderful. And also I'll talk more about the collaboration that we have with the leading Chinese biopharma, Innovent Bio, a little bit deeper in the deck. Next slide, please. So this is the team that I think is pretty well known to those that have followed the story. Obviously, Darren Shafran is the co-founder and someone with sort of, well, really a global leader in sort of understanding the interactions between oncolytic viruses and cancer cells. So a really strong track record, obviously, there through both Viralytics and now ImmVirX. Jenny Jochen joined the board after the successful financing in mid-23, and she's already adding sort of value sort of on a day-to-day basis across many areas of the operations of the company. So delighted that she's come on board. Len Post, a remarkable individual, actually, in terms of just having one success after another, and really when you meet the guy and deal with him and hear from him, you just understand that, because such a wealth of knowledge, and really one of the most brilliant people I've actually ever met in this sector, and delighted to have him again on the board. Rob Routley from Acorn Capital, CEO there, and has joined the board after the financing in mid-2021. And of course, Acorn have got a great track record of helping young companies through to success. So again, great to have Rob on board. And of course, Rob Vickery, who is our CFO at Viralytics, has joined again. So I think with this team, you know that there's a really deep sort of experience across all the important areas in terms of FDA interactions, GMP manufacture, a really strong global network of clinicians, both here and obviously overseas, particularly in the US. Our team in Newcastle, I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute, but 27 strong team up there and really the heart and soul of the business, and exceptional group actually. The balance sheet, standing at 31 million. So we have funds now to take us through till early 2026. And the partnering deal with Innovent Bio, as I said, is to provide their checkpoint inhibitor called sintilimab, which is the leading checkpoint in China, to use in our upcoming combination study with IVX-037. So that's going to be a very big milestone when we get that study underway shortly. The next slide, please. And, I think we've talked about the team before in Newcastle and at other sites around Australia, but what a wonderful experienced group of individuals here, and, full credit to them for, this program advancing so quickly and so efficiently. And, we really do feel blessed that they all decided to come back after the Viralytics experience, and then obviously the experience at Merck for 12 to 18 months, and rejoin the team. And I don't think there's any doubt that this is the best of the Aussie biotech teams in terms of what they've achieved in the past and what they're achieving now. So very, very grateful for their contribution. We've seen the success from that to this point in ImmVirX. Next slide, please. So just a little bit on the mechanism of action. I think mainly the sort of the top point here really is that oncolytic viruses actually, healthy cells can really knock out oncolytic viruses pretty quickly. So they're less able to infect those healthy cells, and the healthy cells can knock that virus out quickly. So you don't really see much in the way of adverse events, really mild adverse events with oncolytic viruses in our Viralytics days, and now with ImmVirX. Contrary though, cancer cells, neoplastic cells, obviously multiply very rapidly and they can spread around the body. But one of the things they have given up is their ability to fight viral infections. So an oncolytic virus can really infect very readily through the receptors that our lead agent is targeting, can then replicate or multiply within that cancer cell and burst it open. And that really triggers off then a pretty powerful immune response. And that immune response can target not just the local tumour tissue, but also can then spread and act around the rest of the body. So it really is a sort of a wonderful 1-2 punch in terms of the virus and the immune system kind of ganging up to tackle the cancer. And I think that's why we've seen success to this point, and I think we'll see it moving forward as well. Next slide, please. Look, I think the cancer immunotherapy space is pretty well known to this audience as well. I mean, it's the most important field for big pharma. Sales forecast to grow to about 300 billion in the coming years. Merck's Keytruda just continues to astound. I mean, double-digit growth still, and I think annual sales have been recently reported at about 25 billion US, so remarkable. I guess what we know is that although those agents have been really a major breakthrough in the way we treat cancer, they still only tackle cancer in a small percentage of patients. So big pharma is looking for agents to combine with them, just to take this out to a much broader population. So I think an oncolytic virus is really a great way to do that. And obviously big pharma have the same view as us. Some of the recent transactions you can see there, including obviously the 2018 deal where Merck acquired us for 500 million upfront in cash. And then CG Oncology tackling a form of bladder cancer, superficial bladder cancer. And they recently raised about 400 million US as part of an IPO, and their market cap now around about 2.5 billion US. And I think that just sort of signals what can be achieved as we progress and move through the clinic. And of course, we're tackling much bigger cancer indications than CG Oncology. So the upside here for ImmVirX is going to be pretty staggering, I think. Next slide, please. This just looks at the cancer types that we're tackling. And I think, again, the difference between ImmVirX and Viralytics is that Viralytics Cavitac was tackling melanoma, which is at the bottom of the table there, where there's really only a few thousand cancer patient deaths per annum across US and China. If you compare that with the cancer types we're tackling initially, colorectal, ovarian and gastric, then we'll follow with liver cancer or hepatocellular. And then our second asset, IVX-055, will tackle lung cancer. You're sort of talking about hundreds of thousands of patients across those two markets, in fact, approaching millions of patients across those two markets. So it's a couple of orders of magnitude higher in terms of the market opportunity for ImmVirX compared to viralytics, and that flows through to all sorts of things in terms of the potential valuation of the company down the track. If you look at the fourth column there, you can see that response rates to the blockbuster Keytruda in these indications, single digits for colorectal and ovarian, sort of in the mid to high teens for the other indications we're targeting. So again, just such a lot of room for improvement. And as I said earlier, I think an oncolytic virus combined with a checkpoint really is a great way to make those agents work a lot better, help a lot more patients, which is what we're all trying to do. Next slide, please. So this just is what they call a Kaplan-Meier chart, and you can review this at your leisure, but just very briefly, it shows the survival of the patients when they commence therapy. And for late-stage colorectal cancer patients, there aren't a lot of good options. TAS-102 is a doublet chemotherapy with lots of toxicities. And if you compare the survival of those patients compared to those that just go on to a supportive care, it really is only around 2 months, in fact, just a little bit less than 2 months. So clearly we want to do a lot better for these late-stage cancer patients, and that's what we're tackling in the first instance with ImmVirX. So a lot of room for us to make improvements here and help more patients. Next slide, please. So in terms of looking at where we're at the moment, in terms of our platform, I think the platform that's been invented by a co-founder, Professor Shafran, really worked very well for viralytics cav attack. I think we now have a second generation platform that we're looking at today, which I think will make this the two lead agents, IVX-037 and 055, even more effective at cancer killing. So 037 is in phase 1A and B, and 055 is just entering preclinical development. So excellent progress there. We're really selecting a virus so that it has even greater ability to infect cancer cells. So there really is this sort of exquisite targeting of cancer cells and leaving healthy cells alone. So this RNA virus can really inflame tumours, as I said earlier, draw immune cells in to tackle the cancer as well as the virus. We've seen really good results preclinically at ImmVirX, and now early days in the clinic. And as we move forward, very sort of pleased with this second generation bioselection process. The clinical strategy is really, as I said, sort of targeting these cancer types where there is a high unmet need. And colorectal, gastric, ovarian, lung and liver, apart from being in the sort of top 5 cancer types globally, we do need better therapies in this setting, and we think that the combination with an oncolytic virus is the way to go. Next slide, please. So just very briefly, we'll have a look at the preclinical results. We've seen these on many earlier occasions, so I won't labour this at all. This is following a single intratumoral dose of the IVX-037, our lead asset, in these immune deficient mice models. So any activity you're seeing here is purely driven from the virus and not from the immune system of the mouse. And you can see we have colorectal cancer cell lines here, 2 at the top, and then 2 ovarian cancer cell lines. And you can see the red lines here are really the excellent sort of suppression of the tumour that you're seeing from a single dose of IVX-037. And this was really well tolerated in the mice, so no issues in terms of adverse effects. The next slide, I think, takes a look at the gastric cancer model, and again, a similar result here in what is a very aggressive cancer cell line where there's been nice suppression of the tumour growth. And then on the right-hand side, we're just looking at different doses of IVX-037. So you can see the control group, the tumours increased in size very rapidly, but we could move from as high as 10 to the 8th the virus dose down to 10 to the 4 and still see really nice suppression. So it just shows you've got quite a broad therapeutic window, which is sort of the ideal profile for any agent actually moving forward into the clinic. So this virus is clearly very active, even at such a low dose. The next slide, I think, again, just looks at this is intravenous delivery. This is multi-dose intravenous delivery. We'll start intratumorally in the clinic and potentially move to IV as we get a little further down the track. But again, you can see IV delivery here has certainly suppressed this colorectal cancer cell line. So very nice activity in that setting. So IV is an aspiration for us as we move a little deeper into the clinical program. Next slide, please. So now let's take a look at what's actually happening in the clinic. And this slide really just demonstrates or describes where we're at. As I said, we commenced studies in April 2023 with the first patient dosed at that time. The prime thing in the sort of initial stages is to make sure the agent is safe. It's the first time it's been injected into humans. So you do go very slowly. It's the reason why these phase 1A studies do take a little bit of time initially, but we've gone through the first 2 cohorts. We've just enrolled the 3rd patient in the 3rd cohort. All the signs are now quite good in terms of the 3rd cohort, the 3rd patient in the 3rd cohort. So quite soon we should complete that 3rd cohort. We then move into an expansion phase where we dose some further patients. And then we think in the middle of the year is when we'll start off with our phase 1B study. Initially, that will be in colorectal cancer patients with the gastric and ovarian to follow a little bit later in the year. But phase 1B is when we combine our IVX-037 with ImmVirX, well-proven sintilimab checkpoint inhibitor. And you can see here that once you get to the sort of the top dose level, we can give multiple doses of IVX-037 as opposed to the few doses we administered in the early stages. We've also been able to increase the dose up to 10 mLs. So we think this gives us even a better chance of seeing signals and activity as we move into the phase 1B, the greater dose, greater number of doses, and also the combination with the checkpoint inhibitor. So I think there'll be a lot of excitement and interest in the next sort of 6 to 12 months. Next slide, please. So I think, the good news is we have completed the 3 cohorts. We're just waiting for conclusion of the 3rd patient, that patient to complete doses, and then we'll be able to move into the expansion stage. It's been really well tolerated. We're also seeing some level of systemic exposure following the intratumoral administration, certainly no dose-limiting toxicities. The adverse events are very similar to what we've seen with viralytics Cavatac in the past in terms of just very mild signs, some fatigue, maybe some chills, and that can be sort of treated, self-medicated just with off-the-shelf type therapies. We've found that the interventional radiologists can very readily administer IVX-037 into liver metastases or liver tumours, into lymph nodes or into abdominal masses. So it's been a very quick procedure. The patients can actually go home that evening after a short observation period. So it's been actually quite well accepted within the hospital environment as well. Some of the preliminary serum biomarkers, one of the really important ones is CXCL10. We found with the viralytics Cavatac that an elevation of CXCL10 when subsequently combined with a checkpoint was a really good indicator of subsequent responses. So it's pleasing to see that we are seeing elevation of CXCL10 in patients after the initial dose of IVX-037, even when we're providing what can be quite a low dose initially as we go through dose escalation. So good news there. The phase 1B, as I said, is due to commence in the middle of the year. So that will be something to really look forward to. And I think we have a really great potential here to start seeing some nice responses in patients. Time will tell. And of course, as we move into phase 1B, as I said, we'll be dosing the patients more frequently with a greater dose volume. So again, that gives us a nice potential there. I think what we can report at this stage is that the oncologists are very pleased with what they're seeing. They're very encouraged with what they're seeing in their patients. And obviously, we'll report more on this as we advance with some more patients through the dose expansion stage. Next slide, please. So in terms of the recent milestones, in terms of the next stage, in terms of preclinical development, well, we've completed the liver cancer cell line assessment, and there's been very nice activity in those liver cancer cell lines. The bioselection is complete of IVX-055, so we'll now get into preclinical development in that case. We've executed the clinical trial and collaboration supply agreement with ImmVirX that'll provide us with free sintilimab for our upcoming study, probably saving us about 3 million per annum if we had to buy the product off the shelf here. So lots of good reasons to do the deal in terms of where it may lead to with ImmVirX, but also the cash saving is a nice bonus here as well. And then in terms of the patent position, we've progressed our filing. Here it includes the very important composition of matter claim that is so important in terms of providing protection down the track, and that'll be highly valued by Big Pharma. And then finally, the R&D tax incentive, 3.8 million, which just adds to our cash pool and gives us that nice long runway to early 2026. In terms of the manufacturing, we have successful completion of our first GMP batch. We now have our second GMP batch well underway in the US, and that's been smooth sailing to this point. There's ongoing work in terms of the enabling storage at lower temperatures and some good results there, and we'll continue with that work. But that'll be a really valuable outcome actually in terms of what Big Pharma are looking for in terms of storage at reasonable temperatures compared to existing products that must be stored at -70. I think the clinical program, I've talked about the recent milestones there in terms of opening up, having 4 sites open and completing enrolment in cohort 3 with the early signals that we're seeing. So perhaps move on to the next slide, please. In terms of the preclinical and intellectual property, obviously now we move into the assessment of IVX-037 in liver cancer, assessing that in vivo models or in mouse models where we look at xenografts, so flank xenografts, as we have done earlier in the other indications. We'll get underway with the preclinical assessment of IVX-055 in lung cancer, so it's going to be very exciting work. And then we'll be filing a patent for IVX-055 in addition to that as we move forward in the coming few months, actually. We'll complete our second GMP batch at the US contract manufacturer. We'll be generating further stability data on our improved formulation. We'll progress on enhancement of the production process. Again, this will be very important as we look to transition across ultimately to Big Pharma to enable them to scale this up to the sort of volumes that we needed for commercial supply. And we'll be initiating production of IVX-055 for clinical studies. In terms of the clinical program, obviously we'll be moving forward with our phase 1A study, looking to move into dose expansion. We'll be opening up new sites, potentially looking at new indications more probably in the back end of the year, but a lot of interest from clinicians to do that. And then most importantly, moving into the phase 1B study to look at the combination of IVX-037 and sintilimab firstly in colorectal and moving to the other cancer types subsequently. So I think the next slide is the final slide. So look, it's really exciting. We are a clinical stage oncology company, obviously now with a platform. We have IVX-037 in the clinic with 055 to follow. There's some really early positive signals in terms of the biomarkers, some activity within injected lesions, and of course it's been very well tolerated by patients. There'll be more to come on this as we progress through the clinical study, so a lot more to learn in this setting in the coming months. The clinical trial collaboration with ImmVirX with the phase 1B study due to start in the middle of the year. We are tackling the most important cancer types globally, so there's going to be a lot of interest from Big Pharma as we move forward. Manufacture's been handled very well by our contract manufacturer in the US. We have 1 batch through with a second one to follow. Look, there's a great opportunity here in terms of partnering this out as we move forward and generate more clinical data. That's really going to be the key. As that clinical data emerges, I'm sure there'll be a lot of pharma interest in us. We've bioselected the second asset to target lung cancer, the most important cancer type globally. And, I think the cash balance in what is still a pretty challenging sort of capital markets environment is very healthy with 31 million to give us that runway into 2026. And certainly there's going to be multiple more milestones over that time as we advance in the clinic. So I think we're really set up quite nicely. So I think that's the conclusion. I guess I'd just like to thank, all our shareholders that have supported us on the journey to this point. We've tried to be, very thoughtful with the cash spend, and I think we've been very efficient and cost effective to achieve all we've done to the cash burn to this stage, I should say. I want to really thank, obviously, the team, the ImmVirX team, for their, great work and progress to this stage is really down to their wonderful efforts. And then finally, obviously, to the treating oncologists and the patients that are enrolled in the study. I mean, thank you for participating and giving us this opportunity to really, we think, develop what could be a pretty exciting new product to help treat cancer patients where there's a really high unmet need. So I think at this point, Matt, I might just turn it back to you to see if there's any questions.
Yeah, no problem at all. Thanks for the presentation. We've got about 5 minutes, so we'll get through a couple of questions.
Okay.
From a capital perspective, I mean, you touched on it right at the end there anyway, but the company's done well to raise a significant amount when the market was a bit stronger, or there's been a good opportunity to. Can you just talk to the sort of runway that you think that provides the company going forward?
Well, yeah, that's right. I mean, we can do a lot. I mean, it runs through till, I think, the last budget I saw was April 2026. It runs through to then, but, it's not going to be the exact date, but, and certainly would look to raise money ahead of that time. But it's a very nice runway, I guess. Many others are sort of struggled to raise money. So we're very grateful for the support of, as I said, our shareholders who've helped us on the journey to this point. Look, I think the main thing is that we're shortly to enter phase 1B, and I'm pretty optimistic about what we might see in that setting. And that's when you start generating that clinical data, that really does open you up to not just investors in this country, but investors in the US and Europe and Asia and so on. And I guess one of the strengths we have is that we know those folks. We've dealt with them in the past, and they've actually been well rewarded through their investment in Viralytics. So as we generate some more clinical data, move into phase 1B, I think there'll be plenty of opportunities to talk to really well-regarded investors to support us further on this pretty exciting journey.
You've pretty well answered the next question anyway, just there, but I'll ask it regardless, which was, have you exposed the company at all to investors in the US yet?
Well, look, I think that, in the tougher times that have existed in the last 2 years, it's been really hard to get interest in the US when you're a preclinical company. So it's been great. We've been able to move the program forward into the clinic so quickly. And now starting to see some pretty interesting signals. As I said, the oncologists are very encouraged by what they're seeing in their patients. So that's great news. And that's really what US investors want to see, is that clinical data in this sort of marketplace. So we are starting to sort of have an outreach there. And, I think we'll be attending some of the bigger conferences in the second half of the year to get the story out there. But we know that path pretty well. And I think we'll be getting back on the big bird and getting across the US and wearing out that shoe leather in Boston and San Francisco and New York, as I did in Viralytics days. Looking forward to getting back there and doing some more of that.
And another related question that's come through from someone in the audience was what's written as what's the current market cap, but I think more accurately be what valuation was the last raised on it?
So post-money valuation was a bit less than 100 million.
Very good.
Which I think, I guess you look at, I mean, we're a lot earlier in the clinic than, say, someone like CG Oncology. But as you generate more data, the thing you've got to remember about colorectal cancer is response rates are so low. So you don't need to see many responses before this becomes really exciting. And certainly the cancer targets that we're tackling are much bigger than the bladder cancer type that CG are tackling. So look, it's all in the future. It's going to be driven by the clinical data, but the upside here remains pretty substantive if we can achieve what we think is possible with our oncolytic viruses in combination with checkpoints.
Absolutely. And just one final one, you touched on it quickly, but your most recent announcement was around obviously InnoVent and your partnership there. Can you just maybe give a bit more background on sort of how that came about and what it means going forward? Yeah.
They're a really exceptional company. I mean, they were founded, I think, 2011 or something like that. And now they're in the top 10 biopharma in China. They have a really nice portfolio of products actually in China, and a wonderful pipeline. But one of the things they lack is an oncolytic virus. And I'd kind of known the president there. We'd had conversations, even prior to sort of COVID, and things kind of got in the way of the discussions with the sort of COVID shutdowns. But he was keen to have some form of collaboration. So they're providing sintilimab for us, which is wonderful. We haven't given away any rights or anything like that. I mean, it's a bit like the early collaboration we had with Merck, actually, where we just have this relationship. We'll share results as we move forward. We don't lose any IP. And, who knows where it might build to. I mean, China's a massive market for all these indications, but we still are completely unencumbered in terms of our rights globally. But just a nice group to work with, honestly. And, we're looking forward to getting into the clinic with the combination.
Very good. Well, Malcolm, thanks very much again for the presentation, and thanks to everyone in the audience for joining, and we'll leave it at that, and look forward to hearing an update later in the year.
Thanks, Matt. Really appreciate it. Bye, everyone.
Thanks.